Let me be as clear as I can be. This budget is an absolute disaster. It is an insult to the working families of this country, and I have to say, it really does expose Donald Trump for the fraud that he is. Over and over again, candidate Donald Trump, when he was looking for votes, promised the American people that he would be a different type of Republican. I think we all remember that rhetoric, that he would be a champion of the working class, that he would not cut Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security. I remember those speeches like it was yesterday. On May 7th, 2015, Mr. Trump tweeted, this is during the campaign, quote, "I was the first and only potential GOP candidate to state there will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid," end of quote. August 10th, 2015, another tweet from Mr. Trump, quote, "I will save Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security without cuts. We have to do it. People have been paying in for years, and now many of these candidates want to cut it," end of quote. Donald Trump. That is what Mr. Trump said during the campaign, but now that he is president, the tune he is singing is very, very different. On page 32 of the briefing book of his budget, Donald Trump proposes cutting $1.5 trillion from Medicaid, $845 billion from Medicare, and $25 billion from Social Security. And Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to insert this page into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, let's just very briefly take a look at what these cuts do to the working families of this country at a time when millions and millions of families are struggling economically today. As I think most of us know, Medicaid pays for more than 2/3 of all of the nursing home care in our country, in addition, of course, to providing health care for millions of lower-income families. Question is, what happens to senior citizens in this country who are struggling with Alzheimer's and other serious illnesses who have their nursing home coverage paid for by Medicaid if that program is cut by $1.5 trillion? So you're a working-class family, your mom is in a nursing home dealing with Alzheimer's, massive cuts to Medicaid. What happens to your mom? Or what happens to the ability of your family to take care of their basic needs now that you're going to have to pay an arm and a leg for nursing home care? But it's not just seniors. Today, Medicaid covers millions of children with special needs. We are the only major country on earth, embarrassingly, not to guarantee health care to all people as a right. But this budget makes a bad situation worse and would throw millions of children with special needs off of the health insurance they have. We have an opioid epidemic from one end of this country to the other. But when you slash Medicaid by $1.5 trillion, you make it infinitely harder for communities and states to deal with this terrible crisis. But it's not just Medicaid. In terms of Medicare, the Federation of American Hospitals tells us, and I quote, this is not me, this is the Federation of American Hospitals, "The new White House budget imposes arbitrary and blunt Medicare cuts to hospitals who will care for the nation's most vulnerable. The impact on care for seniors would be devastating," end of quote. During the campaign, President Trump told the American people that he was going to provide, and I quote, "health insurance for everybody with much lower deductibles," end of quote. That's what he said during the campaign. Let's talk about what he is doing now that he is president. President Trump's budget would end the Affordable Care Act and throw an estimated 32 million people off the health insurance they have right now. Now, how in God's name can you talk about being a friend of working people and then propose to throw tens of millions of people off the health insurance they have? And at the same time, this budget would substantially raise premiums for older Americans and allow states to eliminate or substantially weaken protections for pre-existing conditions like cancer, diabetes, or asthma. This is a budget which will make it harder for our children to get a decent education, harder for working families to get the health care they need, harder to protect the air that we breathe and the water that we drink, and harder for the elderly to live out their retirement years with dignity and respect. This is not a budget, as candidate Donald Trump talked about, that takes on the political establishment. That was his rhetoric during the campaign. This is a budget of the political establishment, of the 1%, of corporate America, of the wealthiest people in this country. This is a budget which practices the Robin Hood principle in reverse. It takes from the poor and working families and gives to the very wealthy. As a candidate, Donald Trump said he understood the pain that working families across the country were feeling. This is not a budget that candidate Donald Trump talked about that takes on the political establishment. This is a budget that does very much the opposite. Mr. President, you do not help working families when your budget would eliminate financial aid to more than 1.5 million low-income college students. I mean, it is really quite incredible to me that people could prepare a budget when hundreds of thousands of kids in this country cannot afford to go to college, when millions of people are struggling with student debt, and this budget makes it harder for young people to go to college. Mr. President, and I would say also that it is unacceptable to me, coming from a cold weather state, and I see some of my other colleagues here coming from cold weather states that would eliminate the LIHEAP program. Seniors in Vermont stay warm because of LIHEAP. This program, this budget eliminates that. But I should say that at a time when we're now spending more on the military than the next 10 countries combined, this budget would expand military spending by $861 billion. Now, for the working families of this country, for the middle class, this is a disastrous budget, but I must confess, there are some good things in it for the wealthiest people in this country. After passing a nearly $2 trillion tax break that mainly benefited the top 1% and large profitable corporations a little over a year ago, the Trump budget would provide another $1 trillion tax break that would, you guessed it, primarily benefit the wealthiest people in this country. Think about it. Cuts to education, throwing millions of people off the health care that they have, cuts to programs that keep seniors warm in the wintertime. Again, more tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country. Mr. Chairman, last year, Amazon, Netflix, General Motors, and IBM, all very profitable corporations, not only paid nothing in federal income taxes, they actually received a tax refund from the IRS. They don't need another tax break when families in this country are struggling to keep their heads above water economically. Mr. President, this is a budget that should be discarded immediately, and a serious budget should be put together that protects working families and not just the 1%. Thank you.